twilight sun, the pallid glow of a warrior's skin, the bellow of alien horns, and the roar of a coliseum. It's a striking image, and the perfect introduction to the antagonist of Dune 2, the Nah Baron, Feyd-Rautha Harkkonen. Yet most, if not all, of what makes this character and this intro so iconic are completely the invention of the films, and a perfect example of the benefits of a good adaptation. I've spoken a lot about adaptations on this channel, and in the current Hollywood landscape, the idea of a new book or video game being brought to the screen is a fearful thing. There are countless examples of bad adaptations, forming a list of shame that grows longer and longer. So when Denis Villeneuve released Dune and Dune Part 2, well, I think we were all pleasantly surprised. Sure, it had its issues, especially with the character of Chani, but I've already made a video about that. So today, instead of talking about what was lost in adaptation, I want to talk about what was found in it, namely, the character of Feyd-Rautha. See, movies and books are necessarily different. Like any artistic medium, each has its strengths and weaknesses, and when bringing a novel to the screen, there are bound to be some changes. In fact, there should be. And one of the clearest differences between the Dune books and the movies are the visuals. Frank Herbert approached the world building of Dune in a less aggressive way. He allowed the audience to be immersed, not poking, prodding, or guiding them, but letting them discover the universe through subtle references and cues. And this is partly what makes reading the books so compelling. But movies are visual, and so out of these few and vague descriptions, Denis Villeneuve had to draw out worlds upon worlds, and this is something that he achieved masterfully, shown most clearly in the Harkkonens and the character of Feyd-Rautha. The Nah Baron, nephew and adopted heir to the Baron Harkkonen, is the perfect narrative counter to Paul Atreides. He is cunning and vicious, and even within the actual lore of the books was meant to be the father of the Kwisatz Haderach, as Paul was meant to be the mother. They're a cosmic match, a rivalry, destined to clash in a final battle for the dominance of their long feuding houses. Rautha is described as a dark-haired youth of about 16 years, round of face and with sullen eyes. And that's where things get interesting. This distinctive bald look that all the Harkkonens have was entirely invented for the movies. And while some may write this off as Hollywood meddling or the market's demand for unsubtle storytelling, I think there's more to it. This is where the complexity of a good adaptation comes into play. See, an adaptation cannot be a page-by-page recreation. There are simply too many differences between the media, the cultural context, and the people. All art takes on a new life once it's consumed, because its significance to the readers and viewers may be fundamentally different than its significance to its creator. Dune is a story about many things, but an obviously prominent component is the ecosystem of Arrakis and the Fremen people within it, formed by it. Paul comes from a world filled with water into one with none at all. Arrakis is a land of death, and yet provides the spice which fuels the universe. And Paul, as the Lisan al-Gaib, is the prophesied one to revolutionize the planet's surface and bring total ecological transformation. But what about the other worlds? Villeneuve had to improvise. He took what was known about the Harkonnens, that they are a brutal, warmongering house with a tyrannical ruler and an industrial homeworld, and reverse engineered it, exploring what kind of ecosystem would produce such a people, and what would demonstrate that best in the medium of film. So, in a stroke of genius, he managed to find a way to communicate history, thousands upon thousands of years, with a single artistic choice. Having established color as the main indication of setting, he decided to make the Harkonnen world a place without it, a soulless planet, sucked dry of its resources, left with only towering buildings of industry and a dead black sun. And to aid in the demonstration of their animalistic hive-like consumption, the Harkonnen armor is designed to resemble the exoskeletons of bugs, of pests, which strip the land of its resources just as the Harkonnens stripped spice from Arrakis. And there's even a buried precedent for this concept of a black and white world. In the book, Baron Harkonnen says, quite suddenly, The Baron's mind could conceive of nothing more beautiful than the utter emptiness of black, unless it were white on black, plated white on black, porcelain white. So Denis extrapolates, and continues this extrapolation with the character of Feyd. In the 2 hours and 49 minutes of Dune 2, Feyd-Rautha is featured in 15 minutes. And in the book, his role is similarly brief, yet I think he's one of the most memorable parts of the story. There is a prominent motif in the Dune saga about family, one which I think will become more prominent as I read the subsequent sequels to Dune and Dune Messiah. And in the films, I think these connections are made clear from the start. Both Feyd-Rautha and Beast Rabban are adopted sons of Baron Harkkonen, taken from their homeworld at a young age and raised on Gedi Prime. And so they take after him. His various qualities split between the two characters. Austin Butler made the fantastic choice to map his voice off of the Baron Harkkonens.
You're a hero. My gift to you. I ought to drown you in that tub.
This is yet another perfect example of good adaptation. A choice which follows psychologically while also resonating the deeper thematic realities of the story. Feyd is a younger, better version of the Baron, and this vocal mimicry nearly renders him a mere extension of his uncle, just as he and Paul's rivalry is an extension of the long history of their houses. These subtle, unspoken choices add import to the final battle, upon which the tension of the narrative rests. Paul is a flawed hero, or a flawed man that becomes a villain, however you want to think about it, but all his decisions are wrought with moral scruples. In Butler's performance of Feyd, he brings to life this lust for vengeance, which both reminds the audience of his similarities to his uncle, as well as the differences between him and Paul. The whole movie is a delicate balancing act, pitting different belief systems, different ecosystems, and different families against one another, all leading to a single fight. And Denis Villeneuve's purposeful refocusing of these plot points towards this is an act of genius. Some people have said that in the films, the character of Feyd is over the top, that his scenes go out of their way to show how evil he is, but I think it's necessary. Given how little he is in the story, it's important to use each and every scene to establish the relevant aspects of the character and to be able to hinge any narrative suspense on these dangers. Feyd serves the narrative as the perfect counter to Paul. He's charming, cunning, and deadly, but Denis exacerbated everything, portraying what a charming figure in an already brutalistic world would be: a psychopath, and more importantly, an animal. I think it's this animalistic sadism that makes the Harkonnens weaker than Paul, ultimately defeated by him, and why, as an audience, when we find out that Paul too is of Harkonnen descent, there is this chilling moment of foreshadowing, a final note of poetic irony in the great narrative. For after all the evil of the Harkonnens, all the lives that Feyd-Rautha brutally takes, Paul Muad'Dib Atreides and his jihad will take even more. Overall, these differences do nothing to take away from what Frank Herbert was trying to say. The film adaptation isn't disrespectful or dismissive, and I think if you look at Feyd-Rautha and how these improvements serve the plot, it's the perfect example of the positive creative potential of an adaptation. But these are just my thoughts and opinions on the matter. I would love to hear what you guys think about Feyd-Rautha in the comments down below. Do you think the films did him justice? Would you rather have seen something else? Who is your favorite character in these most recent Dune movies? If you want to support these videos, feel free to like, subscribe, and maybe even check out the Patreon. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you all in the next video.